Training adjustments prior to travel. This is a big one. Like on the trip I went to Texas, I made sure I was like, okay, like we're going to be gone for 5 days. Realistically, probably not going to train while we're away. So because of that, like I made sure leading up to the trip, I was like, I want to bury myself in training volume. Like I want to really push on my isolation work. I want to make sure that like I need those rest days. So like in actuality, like the workout I had, I think right before we left, I was like, okay, full send. I was like really diligent. I, went into the workout. I was not having it. Like, I mean, my body was just still under recovered from the previous session. But typically what I recommend for most people is to try to overextend themselves specifically on isolation work. So I'm not saying add an additional set to your squats or your RDLs. I'm saying for the movements that have a lot of external bracing, you could absolutely add an intensifier or several intensifiers, like talking about leg press, leg extension, hamstring curl, abductions, cable kickbacks. Like these are all ones that are going to be not as systemically fatiguing as, let's say, a squat. If you have the ability to add like an additional set to a squat, I mean, I'd kind of question whether or not you're sandbagging in your training to begin with, but if you have the ability to do that, or even an intensifier, that still is an option. And the idea is just being like, put yourself in a position where those rest days are actually necessitated. Now, 2, structuring your workouts by fatigue. Now, this is more like while you're traveling, on the days, and in this, I guess, like, let me back up. While traveling, I would have specific days. So I would have days that you're flying, days that you're in the car for an extended period of time. Those would be days where like absolutely you're probably not going to train. Now, maybe there's a slight like possibility, like Jordan flew to Toronto today. He fucking got no sleep last night. He's going to be exhausted by the time he gets there. But if he has some caffeine, I know he may consider doing like a push or a pull workout that is, not going to be the best workout. It's going to be kind of junk, but it's still going to be some movement. And maybe that's what's going to allow him to feel better. For most people, I would say that's not a good idea. And for myself, like unless there's an actual reason that you need to have that stimulus, I'd probably just recommend chalking that day up to a rest day. Same thing with flying back home. When we flew back from Texas, we had a pretty early flight, but it wasn't unreasonable. We went to sleep pretty early the night before because, having kids, most parents are going to sleep pretty early, so allowed us to go to sleep pretty early. We got back to LA, I think it was like 10:30. We were at the gym by like 1, so we were able to get in food, able to stretch out a little bit. We both felt like shit, and it was not a good workout, but it was like, okay, this is going to be like the shake off the rust workout, but it's not going to be one that like I necessarily have high expectations for. Like it needs to happen because whether it happens today or tomorrow, it's just going to be a little bit of a shock to the system. Not a lot of productivity even needs to happen in the session, but a big key component here is adjusting expectations so that, and this was very difficult for me to do at one point, now it's just kind of like, well, whatever, fuck it, this workout's not going to be good. I can either make it worse by having a bad attitude, or I can just get it over with because it needs to happen. Going back to structuring your workouts by fatigue. So once you have the days that are absolute rest days, probably your travel days, then I would look at, if you're gone for, let's say 10 days, traveling 2 of those days, that means you have 8 days left. Okay, so 4 of these days, I would say pick the best 4 days that you have the likelihood of the best workout. These could be days that like maybe you're going to have a higher calorie meal the day before. Maybe you have a light workload. Maybe if you're just traveling for vacation, you're not going to be like walking, 15, 20,000 steps. Just pick these days that are like, okay, the most optimal. And like those are going to be your workouts that you need to devote the most physical capacity to. Now, I would say for most people, this is going to be their lower workouts. They're going to probably be the most systemically fatiguing. But, in the case, let's say you feel really good, you're in between lower days, maybe it is like a really heavy pull day. Now, the other 4 days in this scenario where you have 8 days of like actually being there, not traveling, 10 days of totally traveling, maybe those other 4 days are like, hey, I might not train on these days. And if I do train, they're not going to be great workouts, but they're going to still occur. And those can be workouts, even if you have a lower day that falls in between those sessions. Maybe it is like your leg seat, which essentially now I've just coined as like, it's still my leg day. It's still a day where I do some kind of RDL modality, some kind of split squat. I'm doing some kind of leg press. But I just know the intention is like, it's not going to be a full send. It's going to be like a baby send, like just a little send. The focus isn't really even to hit RIR 1 to 2. It is to get the volume ensure in lieu of intensity. Maybe higher volume would make sense, but still within the constraints of something that I can recover from. So the other thing that I think is it's a little baffling, but that's where I don't want this to come across like is like, oh, how do you not know this? But I think a lot of people underestimate the accessibility to gyms. So I mean, like, yes, if you have the ability to book your accommodations in advance, like you should absolutely plan and be like, hey, I want to stay at a hotel or near a gym just in some sort that I could walk to. If you can, that'd be amazing. But in the case that you're like, okay, the hotel I'm staying at, the Airbnb I'm staying at, not local to a gym, or not like, I don't know, doesn't have a gym in the hotel or doesn't have a gym within walking distance, literally just Google, just find a gym relatively close by. You like, it doesn't need to be like, you don't have to vet the gym to the extent of like, do you have all the machines that I need? Like, just fucking go and do a workout, do a lower workout, like do your best and like, just make the most of what tools you have accessible. Okay. I think oftentimes people just like have it in their mind, well, if it's not the same gym, it's going to be more stress here. And yes, it does take more work to, kind of parse through and like figure out, okay, like what exercises do I need to make substitutions for? But again, something is better than nothing. So again, just make this a priority. And I would even say in the case, like my client who went to Europe for, 2 weeks, training isn't an option because like where she's staying, she's like, there's no way, like the closest gym is going to be 2 hours. So I set her up. I was like, hey, go buy some bands on Amazon. Like you don't need a lot, but like there is still some movement and activity you can get in. I would really say though, when we're talking about like activity as a whole, the thing that's going to put fat loss at bay is going to be cardio. So I mean, like in her case, she doesn't have access to cardio machines. I'm like, I want you to aim for like 5,000 to 7,000 steps at least by midday. And like this could be tough because she's working. So I'm like, if that means like you have to get up an hour earlier to just go on like a 60-minute walk, like realistically you can get in about 6,000 steps in 60 minutes. And if you are to even just like take set a reminder, tell Siri, be like, hey, at noon, I need to check my step count in my health app on my iPhone, because majority of people probably have iPhones. If you don't, it just, hey, like any kind of step tracker that you have, it's like, take a look at it, take a peek around midday. And if you're at 1,000 or 2,000, okay, you got some making up to do. If you fall behind, honestly, the solution could be as simple as just saying, hey, before we go to dinner, can we go walk around for like 30, 40 minutes? I'm a big fan of saying like, when we go, so like when Jordan and I travel, like we're typically going out to get like coffee or something like that. And I'm like, okay, every time we leave, if we go to get coffee or a meal, I'm like, I want to walk a little bit before and a little bit after, and him as well. So it's one of those things, like he's pretty on top of having a high step counter, just staying active, especially while away. But if you do that, if you walk, let's say, what was I going to say? If you do 1,000 steps before every meal and 1,000 steps after every meal, that's 6,000 steps in totality. So it's like you can do that pretty reasonably. And then if you don't move the rest of the day, that's okay. Like you're still hitting a decent amount. So you're still hitting probably more than I'm going to hit today. Now, realistically, should you hit like 10 to 15,000? I mean, it depends. It depends on what the constraints are. It depends on if you can train. It depends on how much you're going to be walking the other days. It depends on if you had 25,000 steps the day before. Depends on what kind of phase you're in. But I think even just having like the cognition of like, hey, I need to prioritize this, I think this can be really helpful.